May the Lord bless your day and your week, pouring out his grace, peace, and wisdom over every step you take and every decision you face. Welcome to today's Deep Dive. I'm your host, and I'm just thrilled to have you with us.
And I'm your resident expert. Really excited to be here for this one. It's a pretty incredible topic today.
It really is. I mean, consider this wild paradox for a second. How does a terrified group of just 120 people, hiding from the authorities in a locked room, manage to launch a global movement?
Right, a movement that outlasts the Roman Empire.
Exactly, and fundamentally reshapes human history. Today, we are analyzing the mechanics of that exact transition. We're bridging the end of Jesus' physical, earthly ministry and the literal birth of the early Christian church, mostly by looking at the first 2 chapters of the book of Acts.
It's basically the ultimate watershed moment in history. You have this tiny, fragile community that within just a matter of days transforms into the epicenter of a faith. And that faith is still, even today in the 21st century, drastically shifting the demographic landscape of the world.
Yeah, it didn't just stay local.
No, not at all. But that transition from an insular local group to a globally expanding force, well, it requires a very specific sequence of events to trigger it.
And to break down how that sequence worked, we've got a great stack of sources in front of us today. We're pulling insights from some really comprehensive theological study Bibles.
Yes, specifically the Holman and the NAA Study Bibles.
Right, alongside some incredibly detailed historical and missiological commentary by M. David Sills. So our mission today is to trace the organizational and spiritual steps that took them from that locked room to the ends of the earth. And we'll see how those exact same principles govern global movements right now. Okay, let's unpack this.
The logical place to start is, well, the foundation of their certainty. Because a movement facing the kind of brutal opposition the early church faced, it just cannot be built on a vague philosophical idea.
No, they'd crumble immediately.
Exactly. The original members needed absolute, undeniable proof of their core message before they could take a single step outward.
And we really see that laid out in the prologue of Acts, right? I mean, Luke is the author, essentially writing part 2 of his gospel account, and he addresses it to a patron named Theophilus.
Right, which translates to one who loves God.
Yeah, so some people think it's just a generic title for any reader. But historically, the evidence points heavily to a specific wealthy patron. The sheer economics of ancient publishing kind of demand it.
Oh, absolutely. Producing a hand-copied manuscript of this length in the Roman world was staggeringly expensive.
Like several days or weeks of wages just for the parchment and the scribe.
Right. Without a wealthy backer funding the duplication, this text just doesn't circulate. So that economic reality underscores how intentional this text is. Luke isn't just jotting down a private diary here. He is producing a formal, verified historical account.
Right.
He reminds Theophilus that the first book covered what Jesus began to do. And the implication is that this new book is the continuation of Jesus' work, just operating through a new medium, which is the disciples.
But for them to function, they needed what Luke calls infallible proofs of the resurrection. And Jesus spent 40 days providing those.
Yes. 40 days is a crucial period. It wasn't just a quick one-off vision. It was over a month of physical evidence. Eating with them, speaking with them, proving he was bodily alive.
The commentary uses this amazing analogy here that I think clarifies this perfectly. Imagine you're standing on a coastline watching a massive storm.
Okay.
You see a lighthouse taking the absolute full brunt of these crashing, violent waves. Now, even if the water obscures the base, with empirical certainty that there is a solid rock foundation beneath that structure.
Because otherwise the first wave would have just destroyed it.
Exactly. The early church withstood 3 centuries of brutal Roman persecution because it was built on the bedrock of those 40 days. As the source notes, a living faith cannot be built on a corpse.
Wow, yeah. It requires a living foundation. And yet, even with that living foundation standing right in front of them, the disciples' theological framework was still surprisingly localized.
Oh, they were still totally confused about the politics.
Totally. Their expectations were entirely tied to their immediate geopolitical reality. I mean, they asked Jesus this really revealing question, Lord, is this the time you are going to restore the kingdom to Israel?
They are still operating on a political frequency. Even after the cross and the empty tomb, a part of them is still hoping for a military triumph over Rome.
Right, a physical restoration of David's throne where they, presumably get to sit in positions of power. It's a very human inability to let go of the paradigm they grew up with.
Which is why Jesus' response is so pivotal. He doesn't just dismiss the question, he totally rewrites their paradigm.
He does. He shifts them from expecting a localized political kingdom to participating in a spiritual, global one. He tells them basically, it is not your jurisdiction to know the timelines the Father has set.
You're out of the political forecasting business.
Exactly. You are now in the global witnessing business. He promises them power through the Holy Spirit and gives them a very specific geographic mandate.
Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth.
Right. It's a strategy of expanding concentric circles.
You start at ground zero, which is Jerusalem, expand to Judea, then cross that massive cultural boundary into Samaria, which the Jewish people historically avoided, and then push out to the edges of the map.
It's an overwhelming mandate. But then, the moment he gives this order, the narrative takes a really sharp turn.
He physically leaves.
He ascends from the Mount of Olives, and the text notes that a cloud hid him from their sight.
Yeah, and this wasn't just a normal rain cloud, right?
No, in the biblical framework, this is the Shekinah glory. It's the visible manifestation of the presence of God. It carries the exact same weight as the cloud that guided the Israelites through the wilderness. It signifies a profound transition of authority.
I have to pause here, though, and push back just a bit, or at least look at this from a psychological angle.
Sure.
If you're a disciple, your leader was executed, which shattered you. Then he came back, which thrilled you. He tells you to take his message to the ends of the earth, and then he immediately leaves. Wait, if Jesus just left them, why weren't they absolutely devastated?
That is a great question. Why don't they just fall apart on the mountain?
Right.
Well, because they finally grasped the logistics of what he'd been trying to teach them earlier. Jesus had explicitly told them his departure was a necessity.
Oh, because of the Holy Spirit.
Exactly. While he was in a physical body, his presence was geographically limited. If he's in Galilee, he can't comfort someone in Jerusalem. The physical departure was the strict prerequisite for the spiritual arrival of the Comforter.
So, by ascending, he ensures his presence is universally available anywhere on earth.
Right. They weren't sad because they understood the massive upgrade in access that was coming.
That reframing changes everything about how they walk back down that mountain. They take a Sabbath day's journey back to Jerusalem and gather in the upper room. And it's 120 people.
The remaining 11 apostles, but also the women, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and crucially, his brothers.
Which is mind-blowing historical evidence because during his ministry, his brothers thought he was out of his mind.
Yeah, they didn't believe him at all.
But seeing your brother executed and having breakfast with him 3 days later tends to shift your theology.
I would say so, yeah.
So they're worshiping in the upper room. But before the Spirit comes, they realize they have a structural deficit. Judas Iscariot has to be replaced.
And the text provides a pretty sobering look at the end of Judas's life. The historical accounts give two different vantage points on his death.
Yeah, Matthew mentions hanging, and Acts describes a horrific fall where his body bursts open.
Right, but when you synthesize the historical timeline of the field he purchased, Eseldama, the commentary shows it's quite clear he hanged himself, likely on a branch over a jagged ravine.
And when the rope or branch failed, the fall resulted in the grim scene Luke describes.
It's a dark, visceral detail, but the commentary points out that this is a demonstration of causality. Jesus called Satan a murderer from the beginning.
So the brutal end of Judas is just the logical conclusion of a life handed over to that destructive influence.
Exactly. Satan's ultimate objective is total ruin. With that acknowledged, the community moves to fill his seat.
And they needed exactly 12, right? Because it represents the 12 tribes of Israel.
Right. They are claiming to be the reconstituted remnant of Israel. So they nominate 2 men, pray, and then cast lots.
Which sounds totally wild today, like rolling dice for corporate leadership.
It feels very jarring to us. But in the Old Testament framework, casting lots was a standard method for removing human bias and trusting God's sovereignty. Matthias is chosen. But notice, this practice is never repeated in the New Testament after this.
Because the whole operating system is about to change. Once the Holy Spirit arrives, they don't need external lots, they have internal guidance.
Exactly. So the structure is set. The 120 are actively waiting, praying, consecrating themselves. And that brings us to Pentecost.
Yes, and the timing of Pentecost is just brilliant.
I could geek out about the typology here for hours. It provides such a solid architectural framework.
Let's trace that architecture because seeing how the ancient agricultural calendar overlays onto the birth of the church is incredible.
Okay, so it starts with Passover. Jesus is crucified on Passover, the ultimate fulfillment of the sacrificial lamb. Then, on the Saturday immediately following, the priests offered a sheaf of the first barley harvest.
The first fruits offering.
Right, which perfectly aligns with the resurrection. Jesus is the first fruits of those who rise from the dead.
And from that Sunday, the clock starts.
You count exactly 50 days, and you arrive at the Feast of Pentecost. On this specific day, the priests were required to offer 2 baked loaves of wheat bread to the Lord.
Oh, wow. So the 120 disciples waiting in that room.
They were the fulfillment of those loaves. They were the first fruits of the newly born church.
The spiritual harvest literally commences exactly 50 days later. All that preparation culminates on this specific morning.
And the physical signs are intense.
A sudden sound from heaven, like a violent, impetuous wind. Not a gentle breeze, a deafening tempest.
Wind is always linked to the breath and spirit of God in biblical literature.
Right, and then the visual sign. Tongues of fire separating and coming to rest on each individual.
Fire communicates the pure holiness and presence of God, like the burning bush.
But the massive paradigm shift here is that the fire doesn't fall on a physical temple building. It rests on individuals.
The believers themselves become the physical temples housing the Spirit. It's the democratization of God's presence.
There's a fantastic analogy from a 19th century writer, W. Arthur, in our sources. He says, imagine you need to break down a massive fortress wall. You have a heavy iron cannon, a cannonball, and a huge supply of gunpowder.
Okay.
You load the powder, pack the ball, aim it perfectly.
Yeah.
But in that state, it is completely useless. A bird could build a nest in the barrel.
It has the potential for destruction, but zero actual power.
Exactly. The only thing that transforms that inert powder into a concussive force is a single spark of fire.
That is the perfect visualization of the disciples in that room.
Right. They had the theology, the structure, the mandate. There were the cannon and the powder, but they were entirely inert until the spark of the Holy Spirit fell on them.
That fire launched them out of the room, and the immediate manifestation of that kinetic energy was the miracle of communication.
Speaking in tongues.
Right. The Greek word is glossa. And what's critical here is that glossa doesn't refer to random or chaotic noise. It refers to structured, intelligible human dialects.
Because Jerusalem was packed with the international Jewish diaspora for the festival, Parthians, Medes, residents of Mesopotamia, Rome.
And suddenly they hear Galilean fishermen speaking fluently in the native mother tongues of all these distant regions.
Which is mind-boggling for the crowd. But the commentary notes the theological weight of this. The gospel must be intelligible.
Yes. God accommodated human limitation by speaking our language. He ensured everyone understood the message in their mother tongue.
But of course, human skepticism steps in. Some mock them, saying they're drunk on new wine.
Which is a cynical dismissal, but spiritually speaking, there's an ironic truth to it.
A holy intoxication.
Exactly. When filled with the Holy Spirit, their baseline behaviors changed. Their joy, their courage, completely altered. These are the guys who hid in a locked room, and now they're preaching boldly in the streets.
That boldness and the mandate for cultural intelligibility created a ripple effect that brings us all the way to global missions today.
Right. The mandate didn't end in the first century, and the demographic landscape of missions today is fascinating.
Looking at the data from M. David Sills, the geographic center of Christianity has totally shifted. For centuries, it was the West. Now the explosive growth is in the global South.
Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia. And they aren't just receiving missionaries, they are sending them out.
And the focus has sharpened, right? Modern missiologists map the world by unreached people groups.
Yes, specific ethno-linguistic communities with absolutely no indigenous Christian presence. Reaching them echoes the exact necessity of the Pentecost miracle.
Because here's a crazy data point. 70 to 80% of the global population learns primarily through oral methods.
Right, high illiteracy, or their language isn't even written down.
Yet 90% of all evangelism resources created by Western missions are text-based. We keep trying to hand-reading materials to an oral world.
It's a massive methodological disconnect. The challenge today is identical to Pentecost. How do you ensure the message is intelligible to the cognitive framework of the listener?
If they use stories and songs, you can't just hand them as systematic theology textbook.
Exactly. You have to adapt the delivery. But the commentary warns about the threat of syncretism?
Right, blending Christian theology with indigenous folk religions.
When you rely on oral transmission in a culture with deep spiritual narratives, the gospel risks becoming just another local myth. You have to be culturally sensitive in how you deliver it, but uncompromising on what is delivered.
It's the Pentecost principle applied today. The Holy Spirit didn't just make them loud, he made them understood. And, that applies to all of us,
Oh, absolutely.
whether you're leading a team, parenting, or just talking to a friend. Are you actually speaking their language? Are you prioritizing their ability to understand?
Effective communication means crossing the bridge into the listener's territory, and it also requires active waiting. The disciples in the upper room weren't just passively killing time, they were preparing.
Which leads to a provocative thought. I want to leave with you today as we wrap up. Think about the boundary Jesus drew when they asked about the future. He explicitly withheld the timeline.
Right, it is not for you to know the times or seasons.
Instead of giving them a roadmap for the future, he gave them power for the present. So think about your own life. How much of your daily anxiety comes from demanding that God reveal the future to you, rather than accepting the grace and power? He's offering to handle the responsibilities right in front of you today.
We rarely get the timeline, but we are always offered the fire.
What a profound truth. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. And as we sign off, remember that God blesses all the listeners. Have a great week.